Good afternoon to all. I am Hilde Blomme, the Deputy CEO of Accountants Europe, and I would like to thank all of you to join us today at our Esef in Practice 2 webinar. First of all, I would like you to allow me to begin by thanking Amana for partnering with us for this event. They are a leading software provider in this space and thus have some insights to share also on audit and assurance. We will be hearing from Amana's Richard Busson a bit later on, and I'm pleased to say that he will be fielding relevant questions on Slido concerning his areas of expertise. Now, why are we talking about Esef today? You know, the European Single Electronic Format and also actually the proposed Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive are important and significant steps towards transparency and digitalization of capital markets information. In July 2021, we hosted a webinar to share the experience of first Esef implementers. Experts from our Esef Audit Task Force presented insights on, first of all, success factors and lessons learned from the first year of implementation in Germany, and also, secondly, ongoing work regarding Esef preparation in France, Spain, the Netherlands, and the UK. And what we heard in the first webinar can be seen on its recording, which is available on our website. And due to the very positive feedback we had and also the very high interest and demand, we were encouraged to actually have this second webinar today. Because when you think about the future is digital, and the accountancy profession should invest in it to be ready for the upcoming challenges and also opportunities. So Accountants Europe is monitoring developments about digital corporate reporting, including Esef implementation, a SAP European Single Access Point, for which the EC will launch proposals in a few weeks, and also sustainability reporting and assurance and its digitalization. And this webinar today is actually an example of this, where we will hear some messages from Amana and also about the first year implementation in Austria and what is happening in the Nordic countries, where there have been some voluntary Esef filings and also audits in addition to the preparation. Before we go to Richard Boson, as far as questions, please, you can ask your questions at any time throughout this event by submitting your questions to Slido. The link to Slido is under your YouTube player, and it is also on the screen right now with the message code #Esef if you go to Slido, the website. We may not have time to answer every question that comes in from the chat, and we hope for your understanding on this point. So without further ado, I would like to go to Richard Boson from Amana. He is their XBRL leader and Esef expert. Richard, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Hilde. Welcome. Hello. My name is Richard, and I'm working for Amana Consulting as well as for EFRAG Project Task Force on European Sustainability Reporting Standards. Let me share with you my personal vision of digital reporting world as well as some experiences from last year. First of all, I'm dreaming of a truly digital reporting, covering financial data as well as the sustainability ESG reports that we will have in the future. Just imagine, up until this year, companies have large and extremely complex systems to collect, calculate, and consolidate financial data. But what happens then? It's copied to Excel, pasted to Word, retyped by design agencies into InDesign, and finally published as PDF files or even printed. The users of these reports usually manually scan the pages for the right piece of information. to type it back into their database for further analysis. I assume that you all agree with me that this is not the most innovative way to do it. This year, Esef came to fix this, and I'm so happy to confirm that it's a great success from my point of view. There are at least 748 Esef reports published already in at least 18 European countries as of today. Companies managed to create those files with a reasonable effort, like many of our clients demonstrated. More than 600 preparers rely on Amana software, of which more than 200 published their first Esef report with the help of our 22 local partners. Just to name a few, like Lufthansa, Bayer, Salus, Hypoport, SIA Automotive in Spain. Personally, I helped many Big 4 and next Big 6 audit firms who are using our software to assure the Esef reports since the beginning of this year. My team developed a special but simple plug-and-play audit tool with a detailed checklist that allows non-technical users to easily check and document every aspect of an expert report in a very short time. Using our solution, our clients can check one report within a few hours. The integrated Esef report comparison and change tracking saves valuable time during the busy season. By the way, I would like to thank Accountancy Europe for their work and paper that we used as a basis of the development of our solution. For today, I have two concluding messages for you. First, for those that do the Esef for the first time, preparers as well as auditors, don't be afraid of digital reporting. It is meaningful, it works, and it doesn't have to be hard. If you are still looking for an easy solution, feel free to reach out to me. And my second message is, now let's work on the details that can be improved in Esef. As of today, there is no best practice for digital signing. Let's make Esef truly digital by finding a standardized way to digitally sign these reports. Let's also define common standards on how to audit it and to improve the quality. Let's evaluate again why quarterly reports are not yet tagged, which are important, of course, for the analysts. Let's increase the tagging requirement to a reasonable level in the notes. And finally, let's digitalize the upcoming sustainability reports right at the beginning by tagging it as part of the Esef reports. I'm looking forward to the upcoming panels, and I'm so happy to take questions using the Slido tool. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Richard, for those very encouraging messages. And for those that have just joined, it happens that people are sometimes a bit late. Please be welcome to our Esef webinar. And if you would have any questions, please fill them on Slido under the hashtag Esef. Now I would like to go to the next part of our webinar, and I would like to introduce John Rowden to you. John Rowden is a member of the Accountancy Europe Esef task force. In daily life, John is the iXBRL leader at PwC in the UK, which, by the way, will implement Esef even after Brexit. John is very involved with the rollout of Esef in the UK throughout various organizations and also within his firm. So please, John, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Hilda, and good afternoon to everybody. Greetings from London, and great pleasure to be here today. As Hilda mentioned, Esef was placed into the UK rule books just a little bit before Brexit, which means we're doing it. It goes ahead for 2021. We have a gateway for the receipt of files. It already works. It was opened up early in this calendar year. And we have our own version of the Esef taxonomy. People can use Esef, but it seems extremely likely they will also be able to use a version of Esef called UK CEF, where we have already incorporated tags for energy and carbon-related disclosures within a broader taxonomy. So it is all going ahead here, and reminders have gone out to issuers to get ready. I suspect there may be more, but there's a lot to do. There is no doubt about it. And so people here are very, very interested in learning from how the first year went in Europe. And many countries we saw Esef adopted either voluntarily or on a mandatory basis. And actually 4 countries did Esef on a mandatory basis. So I am delighted to be able to introduce 2 speakers from one of those countries, from Austria. Firstly, Phillip Kadun. And Phillip has worked as an auditor of financial institutions with KPMG for over 10 years. After 2 years in the consolidation department of a large Austrian bank, he rejoined KPMG in 2015, and he's the co-head of the Department of Professional Practice of KPMG Austria for banking affairs. He's been involved in IFRS 9 conversions in the banking industry and involved in Esef audits and the Esef advisory project since 2020. And we'll be hearing from Phillip shortly, but first we're going to hear from Werner Gedliker. And Werner has worked as an auditor of corporates with KPMG for over 10 years, is one of the co-heads of the Department of Professional Practice of KPMG in Austria, responsible for methodology and reporting. He's also the Secretary General of the Austrian Institute of Austrian Auditors, member of Accountancy Europe, and part of the Esef working project group of Accountancy Europe. So welcome to you both. We have some slides to go up, and I'm really looking forward to this, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions that we'll pick up at the end.
Thank you, John, and thank you for the slides, and good afternoon to everybody listening to this webinar. My name is Werner Gedliker, and I'm the first in this session on the Esef in practice success stories from the first year in Austria. Just to continue, and as an introductory remark, it is important for me to note that any views that we are now expressing our own views and do not necessarily reflect the views of organizations mentioned in the following presentation. We have decided to split our presentation, as in Austria the situation has been a little bit specific, into 2 parts, and my part is the first one. If you go to the next slide, which just tell you a little bit on the Austrian regulatory framework for the financial year 2020. And as you can easily or quickly will then see that it maybe is a little bit different to what the CAOB and the EC consultation has brought up as a discussion, but based on our national legislation, this is the solution we had and we also have for the upcoming season. If you go to the next slide, we have as a basis in Austria, we have general provisions for the format of financial statements, for the scope of the audit, as well as the filing of financial statements. And the first point here is that we have the requirement that financial statements have to be prepared, and this is in an undefined format, and also to be signed by the management means that each and every legal representative has to sign it. This is maybe important to understand and to recognize thinking about any XHTML formatted financial statements and so forth. Further, we have an audit requirement that addresses these financial statements, specifically these financial statements. And thirdly, we have in the end of the process, we have the requirement for listed entities to prepare a so-called annual financial report, which everybody of us knows. in German it's the Jahresfinanzbericht, but it is specifically a different document and different from the financial statements. But it is including the financial statements, and this has to be filed to the officially appointed mechanism, to the OEM, and then also be published on the website and so forth. Yeah, in Austria, this OEM is the Österreichische Kontrollbank, as you can see also in the graph, and we have just these 4 steps in which also then the new requirement for the Esef tagging has been implemented. If we go to the next slide, then we can see that as per an amendment of the Austrian Stock Exchange Act, this requirement of tagging, marking up, and XHTML formatting of the consolidated financial statements has been embedded into the Stock Exchange Act, clearly there and directly, and it's just referring to the illustration of the financial statements in this financial report. The question as to what that means for the audit has been discussed rather early in Austria, and we didn't get any official clarifications from any ministry or any authority or supervisory body. But for the profession, the clarification issued clearly indicated that it is a separate service to be provided, and also tools have been issued. Some tools of that are also based on what the Accountants Europe has drafted. Especially, I refer to the auditors or insurance report, and the services on it have been provided based on ISA 3000. From the framework itself, it can be mentioned that the discussion also included the Austrian standard setter, which played a coordinating role. And if you're interested in the discussions, because there are also regulatory discussions maybe of interest for you in your country, all the minutes are published, and you can have links on this. If you go to the next slide, then you can also see that with regards to the amendment of Article 4.7, nothing changed for the situation in Austria. And this also has been confirmed by the Austrian Financial Markets Authority, which participated in the discussions and issued Q&As on the new obligations, which also are in English. And I'm sure there are some also interesting answers for you and your country. Just to get some practice in uploading the Esef package, the authority also implemented a testing area, a testing environment in which it was the filers have been able to test the uploading. So, but not to mix it up with any substantial checks or reviews of the taggings. It has just been a tool to check as to whether the Esef package can be uploaded without any fatal flaws. With regards to the Esef tagging itself, there also has been some enforcement from our supervisory authority, but this has just been based on formal validations and did not really go into the detail of substantial taggings and marking ups. And as Phillip will then elaborate in detail, there also have been some corrections based on that enforcement by our authority. But from my side, this is all on the regulatory framework. And if you go to the next slide, and Phillip, maybe you can now dive into more details on our experiences and lessons learned.
Yes, thank you, Werner. Maybe we jump right into the next slide. As Werner already explained, the audit in Austria was not linked to the financial statement audit itself, but was a separate audit according to ISA 3000, ISA 3000 for the tagging. So the audit was whether the tagging is compliant. So this is important to understand, because in other countries this was probably conducted in a different way. So, and when we look at what the Financial Market Authority found out in terms of issues that when they analyzed the publications and the filings of various constituents and the participating entities, they identified, amongst others, the following bad practices, and this could be relevant for you, you should observe that so that you don't make the same mistakes as some Austrian entities did. So they first of all identified that incorrect versions were filed to the OAM, the authorized mechanism, because it's of course incorrect to upload the PDF version. You must upload the zip file, the Esef package, so to say. Then there was incorrect identification and labeling of components or the package itself, or the PDF versions, so the naming was not correct. So the names of the files, there is, let's say, there are rules to be observed and to be adhered to. You cannot simply come up with any name here. Then sometimes it was not coordinated by the issuers and external service providers, and there were multiple filings, because then you have two different versions on the OAM platform, which is of course also something that you should avoid. Then when the FMA, the Financial Market Authority, identified some flaws or fatal flaws, and they commended corrections of the package, so that the package needed to be corrected in order to be compliant with the Esef. They noticed that sometimes only on the OAM platform the corrected package would be uploaded and not on the website. And it's paramount that both on the OAM platform and the website, the final and correct package is available for download. Then also, you cannot simply upload an Esef package in English. It must be in local language, at least in Austria, and I would assume that this is similar in other countries as well. You can have additional language versions, but there must be one package that is in local language. At least that's what was required in Austria. And as I already told you, the package must be filed to the OAM, and it must also be published on the website of the issuer. And also on the website of the issuer, the package, so the zip file, must be kind of presented as the only legal valid report, and not kind of in a footnote, and the kind of human readable PDF version that everybody is used to must be kind of named the official report. So that's what the FMA was looking at and what they identified as problems. And you can look that up in the FMA homepage in the Q&A section. And you can also access all Esef filings of the fiscal year 2020 in the link that we have put up on this slide. So these are more or less the observations from the authority in Austria. But the more interesting question is probably, these are the things that in the end kind of were available to the authority, but there was a process before. And this I would like to talk to you on the next slide. And I would talk to you about what, as an auditor or also as an entity applying Esef for the first time, you should watch out. First of all, of course, and our speaker in the beginning, Richard, has already advertised that you need a software solution. This is nothing that you can do in Excel. You need a software solution. Also, as an auditor, you need to be able to open the package, and maybe also as a preparer, because even if you outsource the Esef preparation, you will then get a zip file, and you will be not even able to read it unless you have a software solution in order to open up the zip file. And this software should be able to check for validation errors, so technical errors. And ideally, if you are an auditor, the software solution should also allow for an audit trail. And of course, there are also some IT security aspects, like in some countries, it's not kind of allowed, or it seems problematic if the software resides on a server in the United States and so on. I think data security is, of course, an aspect here. And then the project management perspective on the right-hand side. The first step in every Esef project should be to prepare the financial statement structure. Because what we found out in the first year of our Esef activities was that There were footnotes on the primary financial statement, so on the balance sheet. The problem is you must take every amount that's in a currency, and if there's in the footnote a currency amount, you must also take that. This was a problem for many software solutions, at least in the first year. And the best way would have been to get rid of the footnote at all in the beginning. And sometimes the layout of the financial statements of the balance sheet is very much local GAAP still, and it's just called IFRS, but it's at the hard local GAAP. And this would be the chance to make it more IFRS so that it's more aligned with the taxonomy and that you don't need so many extensions, because you have figures and numbers that line items that are not actually IFRS compliant or not available in the taxonomy. And the last thing, please make sure that the same amount, the same figure has the same amount on each page, or because the balance sheet total, or let's say the end of the P&L, so the gain or loss for the period should be the same in the P&L statement and in the statement of equity. If there's some rounding differences, this will cause problems in Esef, because you can have for one tag only one number, and there cannot be two numbers, even if this is due to rounding. This has caused problems and could have been avoided if from the very start these numbers would have been identical or rounded in the same way, let's put it this way. Therefore, it's paramount that the client staff or the preparer staff familiarize themselves with the Esef reporting manual, because in this reporting manual, it's not very comprehensive, only a few pages. The major, most important rules are outlined, and everybody who tries to embark on this Esef journey must be familiar with these rules in order to avoid problems further down the way. What has proved very helpful is to do a trial taking. So we asked our clients, where we did an audit, to come up with a trial taking of the prior year or of the third quarter. And this showed the problems, technical problems, content-wise tagging problems. And our experience was that we needed at least 3 or sometimes even 4 or more iterations. So we sent them back, tell them the errors, they try again. We upload it in our software again. Then we find additional questions, new problems that were not there before. And it took us at least 3 to 4 iterations in order to come up with an acceptable final Esef report aligned with the ESMA manual. And therefore, it's also paramount to start early and align the timeline for the final report, and to be involved as an auditor at an early stage. If we go to the next slide, I've summarized for you the major challenges that we have identified. There, of course, are 2 types of challenges. The ones are the tagging challenges that most people were aware of. We have a taxonomy of more than 6,000 tags that you have to choose from in order to label your financial statement figures, at least the primaries. Everybody was aware of that. Still, it was not always the case that all available tags were used. There were extensions where there shouldn't have been any extensions. And if the extensions were really required, they were incorrectly anchored. Because you have an example here. If you have an extension because you believe that you have a more detailed approach, this extension might not be required. It's only required, if you see on the left, on the right-hand side, if you have 2 types and if you break it down more. If you only have a particular thing and you believe that the label of the available tag is too wide, it's not a problem. You still must use that label and not use an extension for that. So, and these are the rules that you have in the Esef manual, and if you read through them, you can avoid such, let's say, problems or misconceptions that then cause these iterations. That's for the tagging, but equally important, if not more problematic, are the technical challenges. There's a number of parameters that you must set: decimals, scales, signage logic, and balance sheet types, and so on. And these also cause problems if they are incorrect. For instance, we have the result of the minorities. Sometimes in the P&L, it's like the result of the total result minus the minorities gives you the result of the ownership of the parent. And and this minus is of course incorrect because the result is an absolute result or has usually the other sign. So you cannot simply, without thinking, take the figures from the financial statements. So there are some things to observe. And then, of course, it can happen that the software will create some warnings or some errors. And in the first year, it was partly not very clear whether these errors are just warnings and therefore can be waived, or whether they are really fatal flaws or really critical problems. And thankfully, with the update of the Esef reporting manual, some of these questions in the first year have now been clarified, and it's now more clear what is acceptable. And for instance, some calculation errors due to rounding can be waived, and other things are simply not acceptable. Yeah, and then we also experienced some HTML problems where tagging was not possible due to some flaws in the conversion of existing PDF files, where then the figures that should have been tagged were kind of torn apart into separate bits. And then, of course, if the number is no longer there, you cannot tag it. And so sometimes some software providers used hidden tags with display none features. It has now been clarified that this is not allowed and not in line with the reporting manual of the ESMA. And as far as I am informed, these, let's say, teething problems in the first year have now been done away with most software providers, as far as I'm informed. So let's hope that also here the first year problems have been solved. Finally, I have a slide prepared for you on the next slide that shows you we have analyzed in Austria roughly 100 Esef packages from the first year that have been uploaded. So this is not only our clients, it's a kind of almost comprehensive picture of the Austrian market. And we have analyzed them, and we have seen that still in 75% there were some validation errors. I mean, obviously they could have been waived, or maybe the packages were not audited and the FMA has accepted them for the first year. But maybe those errors, we don't know whether, as you see that there are sometimes more than 100 errors, but this is only a small fraction. Only for a quarter of the packages, there was no validation error. And so there's, of course, still room for improvement. Some of these validation errors would have caused, according to the new updated manual, some severe flaws. In the first year, they were kind of waived and accepted. There are also other optimizations in terms of graphical display and some other technical shortcomings in many of the reports that we analyzed, because in most of the times the PDF report looks nice, but then the Esef package doesn't look that nice, and there are sometimes layout problems. And then as we told you, there sometimes are technical errors. This is usually the case, or was the case, when a PDF was converted in order to create the Esef package, which caused the problem that sometimes the figures were not identified upon the parsing of the PDF, and so you could not make this hovering, so that when you hover with the mouse over the figure, that you see the tag right away, due to this hidden thing. So what we saw is when a PDF is converted, we have technical errors. When a Word file was converted, there were less technical errors, but then there were shortcomings in the layout. I understand that these technical challenges from the first year should have now been improved by most software providers, but these were lessons learned from the first year. Yeah, that's it from my side, and I think we are open now for questions regarding our experience in the first year.
Philip, Bernard, that's been extremely insightful and illuminating, and then we have many questions. Here's the first one. Are you seeing listed companies addressing ESEFs differently second time around, getting ready for the second time around of reporting?
Thank you, John. As already mentioned, and I understand your question as to do listed entities maybe issuers maybe go for an assurance service in Austria. We do not have any statistical data on how many had engaged an insurance provider for an insurance service, because these reports haven't been published usually. But from the clients, we do get mixed answers on this. Some are going for a second time. Some are also really requesting for it. But maybe also of interest is how will it continue in Austria as it regards this mandatory provision of this audit or assurance service. And as we can foresee for Austria, with the CSRD, this sustainability reporting directive, there will also then be a clear requirement to prepare the financial statements and tag the financial statements as from the preparer side, and then also the audit requirement will there also in Austria be included. So for the next season, we will see its mixed answers on this.
Thank you. Thank you. And I guess assurance on this type of data was something of a journey for everybody. It hadn't been widely done before. For you both, what were the biggest surprises for you on that journey of launching a new assurance service?
Yeah, maybe I take that from the technical arena. I mean, the biggest surprises were, of course, that people in the CFO department were more or less engaged in this Esef thing, and they are experts from let's say IFRS standpoint, know the numbers, but they have less experience with the technical side of things. And we have seen that the validation errors and these things, software problems, are new for them, and they cause bigger problems than the tagging. Yeah. So this tagging they had been prepared for. They know IFRS. They know roughly which tag to use. But they had, from my perspective, many people had underestimated these technical challenges, and also some of them, unfortunately, did not familiarize themselves enough with the requirements in the Esef manual from ESMA. So, yeah, as I said, everybody who embarks on this for the first time, please watch out for the formulas, for the signage, for the roundings, and these, let's say, things that you probably underestimate, but that cause problems when you want to end up with a flawless and validation okay package, so to say.
Sounds like almost anything that could go wrong does go wrong from time to time.
That's why you should start early, and why you need many iterations. It will not be that you get a package, you simply sign off on it, and and you upload it.
Yeah. But maybe I just share the views of Phillip. For me personally, just one sentence. It's been the extensions also which have been really widely used, and although there have been basic elements, and although these are basic considerations, we really had surprisingly many discussions on why there has been an extension, although there is a basic taxonomy element.
Thank you.
Yeah, the problem is that the taxonomy has 6,000 elements, and people looked only in the first 2 or 3 sections where it says balance sheet and P&L, and overlooked that there are detailed sections for each standard where you might find the tag that you were looking for but didn't find in the let's say primary section.
Well, absolutely, and I know from experience that actually the P&L and the balance sheet are often the easiest part to tag. And then when you start getting into the statement of change of equity and the cash flow, things can get a lot more complicated, a lot more quickly, actually. Right. And it is all of those primary financial statements to be tagged. Okay. I'm curious about specialist expertise within audit assurance firms. How did you balance the need for some specialist expertise on this with the involvement of the existing engagement teams who know the client, they know the financial statements, they know the substance, and are there for the judgments around tagging? How do you get that mix right?
Yeah, correct. As you said, I mean, this is new for everybody, also for us auditors, and therefore we, in Austria at least, took the approach that we kind of concentrate this Esef know-how in a smaller team of specialists, which allowed us to gain synergies, because this handful of specialists were looking at all the Esef engagements, and therefore they could compare and learn very quickly, and we therefore soon you found the same things over and over again, and already knew how to approach for this. And since it was a first year, we said let's gain expertise with the specialists that are involved in consulting and in insurance, and that gain the expertise. And now we have this set of experts, and now we are able to roll this out to more people, to a broader scope of people, and bring that into the various audit teams. And as we explained in the beginning, the audit was separate from the financial statement audit because it was only a tagging audit, which also allowed us to follow up on that approach.
That makes sense. Now, my favorite topic in all of this, materiality. and I think a lot of people are wondering how to approach that topic. Not so much from which tags am I going to test, but if things aren't quite right, how do you go about deciding whether the client can have a clean report or need to have another go and make changes? Any words of wisdom or advice, I think, will be very gratefully received across Europe on that one.
Yes, John, of course, we do know ISA 3000, and we do know that there is the possibility to take a risk-based approach, or there's an obligation to. Initially auditing, this initially prepared Esef packages rather in each and every case ended up in a full scope 100% audit of the tags and discussion about. And that means that these requirements from our standards to set a materiality for planning purposes, so that you maybe design any sample and then go only for the sample just to conclude with on a reasonable basis to as to whether this financial statement this Esef package is labeled and tagged and so forth in a correct manner. Didn't get that importance. So for planning purposes, it didn't get that importance. And of course, then we identified misstatements or simply errors, but also maybe because it's been the first time, and also because of the sanctions we have on this, it's really enormous penalties you have to pay. They simply corrected almost each and every error, so that only there remained minor, really clearly ignorable things, and so means both at the beginning as well as at the end of the audit, the determination as to whether anything has been remained incorrectly didn't really get that importance.
Thank you. And a question for Phillip that's coming through on Slido, and this idea of people looking at their primary financial statements and perhaps tidying them up as a result of the need for everything to be tagged, and looking at footnotes to the financial statements. Did you see that frequently? Was that something that resonated with clients?
Actually, for those clients who approached us early, I think everybody needed it, because so far it was simply, how this happens. The auditor says we need something here and there, and then people go there and simply add a footnote in order that the auditor is silent. Yeah, but with the Esef taxonomy it doesn't work, and the most problematic cases were where the financial statements are already final, and then they thought, we have Esef as well, and then they gave us the final financial statements where they could not change anything. This was then a problem also from a technical perspective, because then you had to kind of come up from a technical side, from a software side, with ways to take the footnote, where some softwares were not really ready to do that. So the sooner the better, and my recommendation is do this tidying, make your life easier, get rid of footnotes, get rid of textual explanations below the cash flow, and make it a real note in the notes and not on the primaries, so that you don't have to take it.
Okay, and another question just coming through here on zero balances. Do you insist on them being tagged? Should they be tagged? Can they be left untagged? Dashes, those sort of things?
As far as we understood it, everything that's not there doesn't have to be tagged, even though it's obligational. Also from the European side, there are some tags that are obligational, like the name of the ultimate parent or something. But if there is no ultimate parent, then you simply omit this tag. And if you have 0 tags in both years, you leave them out. If you have 0 in 1 year and with a number in the prior year or the other way around, then you should take both years. That's
okay.
But as it as the question regards 0 amounts of being nil, of course any figure has to be tagged, although it's nil. If this is the question. Thank you.
If it's displayed in the financial statement, then it must be tagged. That's the topic. Yeah. If you don't display a figure, then there's nothing to be tagged.
Well, on that note of minimizing work, which I'm sure will be welcome across Europe.
Yes.
I see Hilda has rejoined us, and that usually means we are coming to the close of our session. So I want to thank you both for a very illuminating session and the work you put in to prepare it and answering the questions. I know we haven't been able to answer all of them, but there is another Q&A session to come after the next session. So hopefully some of it get picked up there. So thank you both. It's been a pleasure doing this with you.
Yes.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Thank you, John.
Thank you very much, John, Werner and Philip. That was very engaging, not only as far as challenges and issues, but also solutions related to Esef implementation. So that's really much appreciated. So with that, we will slowly go to our second panel, which will be led by Ronald Van Langen. Ronald is active not only in our Accountancy Europe Esef Audit Task Force, but mainly in his day-to-day life at KPMG in the Netherlands in the Department of Professional Practice Assurance, very much involved in Esef and its rollout in his firm in the Netherlands and also at the NBA, the Koninklijke Nederlandse Beroepsorganisatie. I'm sorry. So Ronald, the floor is yours to take us to what is going on in the Nordic region. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hilde, for this introduction. Yes, we are not talking about Esef implemented in the Netherlands today, but we are curious about how Esef has been implemented in the Nordics and how the audit has been experienced. And the Nordics, we just picked a few countries, and I'm more than pleased that we have with us today from Finland, Mika Kuhänen. And Mika, his first experience with XBRL was 2007. He started working on Esef in 2019 and has been involved in many engagements providing assurance on Esef reportings in Finland, and is working closely with his colleagues in the Nordics and Estonia. And he's a member of XBRL Finland working group, and I like his motto, do it now and not after Christmas, and that is really also about Esef, start early and prepare, but we will come about those lessons learned later on. Also with us today is Mona Alfredsson from Sweden. She's an authorized public accountant with over 20 years of experience, audit partner at Ernst & Young, member of the FAR, which is the Institute of the Accountancy Profession in Sweden, and that is playing a role in development professional standards, education and information for the accountancy profession in Sweden. And in her role, she was involved in developing the professional standard on auditing Esef in Sweden. And last but not least, we have Hendrik Gungart from Denmark. Hendrik is an authorized state public accountant in Denmark for over 20 years. He is head of the Accounting National Office for Audit and Accountancy at Deloitte. He's working with XBRL for over 15 years, and he is responsible for the development and operations of his system for preparing annual reports in XBRL at Deloitte for about 10 years now already. and they are producing 17,000 annual reports each year for their smaller clients. Not Esef, but that gives at least the impression about how much XBRL has been implemented in Denmark. Furthermore, he's the vice chairman of the Committee of Accounting in the Danish Association of Auditors and a member of the board of XBRL in Denmark. That about the short introduction, and the idea for us having this interview is really about getting a flavor of how Esef has been experienced in the first year. And let's start with Finland. Mika, may I give you the word?
Okay. Last year, Esef was voluntary, and also the audit or assurance was voluntary. And approximately half of the companies did Esef reporting as voluntary, and half of those companies assure this Esef report by auditors, and there was this Finnish Auditors Association which made guidance for assuring Esef reporting. That's based on ESIA 3000, and for example, we took this guidance quite literally, although we look through all the tags in Esef reporting instead of getting a group of tags or some kind of base of tags on there. But at the end, 25% of the companies did that assurance, and this year I hope that since Esef reporting is mandatory, but I guess, I don't know, but I guess we are the only country in ESMA area where Esef assurance or audit of Esef report is voluntary still. So I really do hope that most of the companies do get assurance of Esef reporting. Let me see. Some of the things which in Finland, I guess this is a little bit local situation also. In Finland, we do have the separate report of assurance reporting, so you can have it in XHTML file, but it's a separate from audit report. So it's a little bit the same like it is in Austria. And let me see, is there something else you want to ask?
Well, no, thank you, Mika. Well, there are a number of questions I will raise, but let's go to Mona as about what is their experience on Esef prior year in Sweden.
Yes. Well, in Sweden, I need to say that we only had 3 companies that I know of that actually made their reporting in the ESEF format. And the reason for this is that there were discussions already in November, I think, about the Transparency Directive being changed, hopefully. And even though the proposal for a new law came first in January, or end of January, actually, 2021, the proposal there was clear that it was going to be a proposal that it was going to be postponed for 1 year, and that the law was going to be enforced retroactively from January 1st. Based on that, I think there were starting discussions in Sweden between auditors and the issuers, and between the issuers, what are we going to do? We do not have the permission to postpone it yet. But then the Swedish FSA issued, I think it was the 1st or the 2nd of February, a statement where they said we will allow, they are the recipient of this, and they said we will allow companies to report in the PDF format for the 2020 annual reports. And we will not review whether the companies have actually an ESEF format for 2020. based on that, I think that most companies, in collaboration with the auditors, decided to postpone this if there was a lot of other things to consider, also with the pandemic, and so all but 3 companies that I know of made a decision to postpone this.
Thank you, Mona, for this, and quite remarkable that in Finland a high number of countries, a high number of companies voluntarily filed in Esef, while in Sweden, well, as you mentioned, just 3 of them, which you are not aware of. How's that in Denmark, Hendrik? Can you elaborate a bit about how Esef was being implemented in the first year in Denmark?
Yeah, in Denmark as well as in Sweden, the Danish FSA, being the appointed mechanism in Denmark, made an announcement in December that they were delaying the requirement to 2021. Many companies were at that time already very far in the process of preparing for the SF format, and I don't have the exact number, but around 1/3 of the companies, the listed companies, chose to report according to the SF requirement for 2020, and 2/3 decided to postpone it. And I think that, being honest, that was quite good that it was postponed, because we had some challenges, and the companies had challenges as well, and handling this new format, and many of the remarks that Phillip came with earlier from the Austrian experience also were the experience that we saw here in Denmark, with a lot of technical issues, where we actually was prepared that it was be the tagging and the different elements in that taxonomy that actually would be the difficulties, and where we had to discuss things with the client. But it was more technical issues that actually was the problem. It was mandatory to have an auditor's opinion on this. We have a local order in Denmark regarding in relation to the auditor's assurance on reports, and a paragraph was included in that, saying that if filing was made in the SF format, then there should be an auditor's opinion on the SF requirements, that they were in line with the requirements. And even though it was a Danish order, it was based on the ISE 3000. And also on top of that, the Danish Auditors Association made a guidance on the work to be done, and also the wording of the auditor's opinion in this area, including also how the management should declare that the annual report was in compliance with the SF requirements. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. That's very helpful. So not a new standard, but referring to ISA 3000, but still legislation that was in place to mandate the audit of SF, and additional guidance with the Audit Institute. Well, that's quite helpful. And so I just see that in a number of countries, well, the Transparency Directive has been implemented differently, and that leads to different legislation and approaches. Going back to Mika, you had already had some experience with SF filings and audit. What are we already learned a bit about the Austria and the common pitfalls, but maybe you have something to add on to that.
Oh yes. To be honest, Phillip also almost cleared the table here. Everything he said, I totally agree with him. The thing I just would like to say everybody that the first time is the first time. Also with SF reporting, and also auditing SF reports. First time is always the first time, and to all my colleagues who are going to do this first time this year, I just say try to get going on as fast as possible, because the first zip files you are going through, it will take a lot of more time than the later ones. And with the customers, the listed companies, I think the idea to do the 2020 zip file, and I would like to say 2020 zip file, because if we are talking about the quarter numbers, there are many cases where all the quarter numbers are there for SF reporting that needs to be, and so for that reason, I think 2020 is almost better to have 2020 SF report as a try run. And also for example, we get the previous year's numbers into our system, so we don't need to check them again with the primary statements. So I allow companies to do the 2020 as a try run this year, especially the new ones.
And with the dry run, Mika, sorry for interrupting, are you focusing just on the technical validation, because that is one thing, or are you just looking at the tagging in as well?
Everything. What we do with the dry run is that we look the tagging, we look the numbers, and all the values what the tag has, the dates, signs, calculation, and also one important thing is the XHTML file, how it looks in a browser. It is surprising how many shadow text there are, how many times the layout is not what numbers are in the wrong places a little bit. Some of the numbers are in the left hand side, some of marks of minuses are missing, and all that kind of things are happening there. So you need to look the XHTML file.
Okay, thanks for that, Mika. I've experienced a bit breaking up, but I'm not sure whether that is my connection or not. But Mona, I can understand that reviewing of doing an SF audit on basically in the first year, because prior year you didn't have that many experience. How do you deal with that in Sweden, especially with the Audit Institute? Are you working together to provide some guidance for the auditors?
Yes, we are. We have in Sweden, first of all, we started already last year to prepare for an standard for Esef. And we're basing that standard on the ISA 3000, similar as we've already heard other countries mentioning today. And we went through that rather thoroughly and have guidelines including there about the technical review that you need to do, the tagging, and also, of course, as we've said, how it's then going to look in a reader. But we also work together now. Currently, we're working together because we've noticed that there are a lot of practical questions and issues that you encounter when you're actually doing the dry run, as we are now for the 2020 numbers. And within this Institute of the Accountancy for Profession in Sweden, we are soon to issue a Q&A where we have some of the common questions that we have identified and some guidelines and some responses that we hope will help both the issuers and the auditors in proceeding with the work for 2020 dry run, and also for the 2021, of course.
Can you elaborate a bit on what will be included? What are typical Q&As?
Well, there are some typical Q&As. Of course, we have questions on how detailed does the work need to be done. We have there questions about materiality. Should we have a different materiality for the ESF opinion or the statement that we have compared to the audit in general? And our guideline there is that no, It's an audit that we perform. We're given a reasonable assurance statement on this, and we should have the same materiality levels for this work as we do for the audit in general.
At least that is luckily also in line with the COB guidelines that will be that is being issued today, at least by the Greek authority. I just saw it on the web, but also there. The threshold for materiality is about as a basis use the same materiality as for a financial statement audit.
Yeah, because I mean the reasoning we have been having there is that when you tick and hide the old printout or the old PDF, what materiality did you have there, and you're going to have the same for the Esef. It's kind of a natural response when you think of it, but there are many questions on that, and I think it's good to have a Q&A and also to have the CAOB, of course, in a similar response.
Okay, I see one of the questions, and then I will move on to Denmark again, about digital signatures. Is that an issue in Sweden? Are we doing digital signatures on the Esef reporting package?
Well, that's a question that's been discussed a lot, actually. And the closer we get to 2022, when we're going to sign them, the hotter this topic gets. We cannot currently sign a zip file in Sweden. When the board of directors sign the annual report, they need to either sign digitally a PDF file or manually with a pen and paper on a printout. So we cannot currently sign the zip file. And that's one of the questions that's been discussed a lot currently, and also then how we're going to identify the zip file that we have been performing our assurance procedures on, and how to get that hash number into the auditor's report.
Okay, thanks for that. Hendrik, do you have also experiences with Esef and common pitfalls that hasn't been discussed yet? And I thought you will have, but go ahead.
Yeah, but I think I could not on everything that Phillip actually said earlier, and also some of the experience that Mika came with. I think one of the experiences that we had was also on the client side, that they had to take each stakeholder and include them in the process, and also make sure that they understood that this was a new format. The annual report was in this new format. It was not a PDF. PDF was a version of the annual report, and actually we had some experience with one of our clients that based on that the investor relations department actually in very last minute chose not to file in the Esef format because they were uncertain that their primary users was aware of that they would receive the annual report in this format. So make sure that, or perhaps a good advice to the companies is that have all stakeholders on board on this issue, and also as Phillip said, give time to 3 or 4, 5, 6 perhaps iterations, different versions of the annual report in the timeline to make sure that everything is in place on the planned time. And of course, a trial run based on the 2020 annual report would be beneficiary in that context.
I can't agree more. It is really about preparing upfront, do a dry run. But have you experienced also about final changes or late changes? Because I can imagine that preparing a PDF is different than preparing an Esef reporting package. And we also know that once the audit comes to be finalized, there might be late changes either identified by the auditor or even by the board itself to, for example, change the board report for bits and pieces. Can you elaborate a bit on that?
Luckily we didn't have any changes, last minute changes to the tagging that had sort of been done before the board of directors approved the annual report at the meeting, but we saw, of course, that changes were made in the XHTML file, and therefore new files were to be prepared and new files were to be reviewed by the company as well as us as auditors. So sufficient time should be set aside to that. And also, I think that always it is a stressful time to have the annual report prepared in the last minute, but definitely it was not less stressful in preparing the SF files. And I think that, again, making both the finance department, investor relations department, and other stakeholders within the company familiar with this format well ahead of actually the process of finalizing the annual report is important because it is a new format, and of course the companies and the management is uncertain and also a bit nervous of whether these files actually is okay, and sometimes also the audit teams is nervous and perhaps not always can answer all the questions. So the more questions that can be answered well ahead, the better.
I fully agree, and that it's. I also have seen in practice that some issuers at the end decided to file in PDF rather than in SF because the impact on their year-end process was too challenging. So it's not just about, if we talk about dry run, we've always thought about 2020 figures and getting it in well before Christmas, as Mika said. But I also can iterate that for the issuers, it's also relevant to do a dry run as about, imagine that you have a late change. How does that impact your process and how much time is needed to do that? And Mika, I see your thumbs up. Maybe you want to add to that. And otherwise, I have some other questions in my chat I will ask.
Well, not really anything else, but sorry for I heard that I have some problems with the voice or connections.
It's loud and clear now, so go ahead.
Yeah, okay. So I tried to go through. But I would like to say also with technical errors or technical validation that just don't forget that the warnings might be also actually errors. So warning is also always a kind of that, hey, take a notice on this issue, whether it's an error or not. And this is something which we think or took very seriously. And the other issue I would like to, kind of dress out here is that this is not black and white at the current moment. There are many areas which, since this is the first time, there is no standard way of doing things and no guidance in everything. So there are a lot of things which will be that if, let's say, we say today it's like this, but maybe tomorrow it's something else. And that's something which we all need to understand.
Yes, that is true, and I especially around tagging, you could argue whether an extension is needed or not. And I've been involved in many of that discussions. And what I just said, it's sometimes it is not black and white. It is sometimes really about professional judgment. Do you also have experience with block tagging so far?
Well, none of the companies we went through happening, and also we really don't have anything for that. But I assume that will be a little bit, how would I say, surprise that it might be a little bit more job than everybody are expecting right now. For example, in Finland, companies are doing several verses, different language verses, 2 or even 3 language verses, and it depends on how the software is done. That is that a big job or not? Do you need to do the tagging on every it might be a surprising issue, but I guess there's an old Chinese say that you need to worry about 2 times. So we think it the way that we are going into the block tagging and those issues after this year's Esef reporting is done.
And that is so true. It is well, implementing Esef was already challenging, at least in a number of countries. We were glad that it was voluntarily, so we didn't have the mass to produce, either from an issuer perspective, software vendor to providing that support, or even from an audit practice. This year it will be the full scope, but just the primary financial statements. And I see already that a number of issuers will prepare for block tagging, maybe not issue it, but even then also it is about doing a dry run, start early, and we will see that challenges along the way. Probably not that much this year, but going on. I see that we still have about 5 or 10 minutes, and I'm just looking into my chat whether I have additional questions.
In the meantime, Ronald, perhaps I could, yep. Something that
go ahead, Hendrik.
Actually, was that last year we thought that it was a good idea to have the audit work to be performed by a smaller group to make sure that everyone had the experience and also could make the same judgments on different issues. But we actually found out it was important that the audit teams also were involved in this area, because we had to know exactly what was included in the different elements in profit and loss, balance sheet, cash flow statement, etc., to be able to evaluate whether the tagging actually was correct or not. So it is not something that can be outsourced to a group of auditors or people that do not know the client in question.
No, just the reference, just looking at it, reading the line item in the financial statements, sure provides a hint, but if you don't know the details, that hint maybe lead to the wrong tagging.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thanks for adding that. I see a question around mapping documents. Have you done the audit on Esef on a mapping document just provided in Excel, or are you just needed to have the dummy Esef file and run it in through a number of tools? Maybe, or doesn't it matter?
Well, if you ask me, Ronald, we run it through our tool in Deloitte. Actually, that the output from that iExpRL tool actually is an Excel sheet with all the information presented and with different audit procedures to be performed on each of the different data that is included and being XBRL tagged. So we are using that output. We do not use the mapping document from the service provider or from the company. We read the Esef files and prepare an Excel sheet that is based on our tool and review the information from there.
And I can imagine that if the ESF file is available, why not just run it and you see the validation technical errors as well, and just use the output for the documents. If that is not available yet, because maybe the client has issues with preparing the SF reporting packets, or there are that many technical issues you can't even produce and run it, sure, then a mapping document in Excel will help. Yeah. I saw another question about materiality, whether that is the same as the financial statement audit or different, but I think we already covered that, that it is the same. Or Mona, maybe you have something to add to that again, because the Swedish Audit Institute are providing some Q&As for the profession in Sweden. Maybe you can elaborate a bit more on materiality and some other guidance that is included.
Yeah. Well, if we go back to the materiality, I would say that we as I already said, we have the same materiality for the SS as we have for the audit in general. But then, of course, there are certain errors that are more critical. If you have the incorrect currency, if you have million SEK and it should be 1,000 SEK or euros, as most of you probably would have. It's just us having a local currency still. Those errors are, of course, more significant and need to be corrected. But then if there is, we've been discussing that, if you have a file and there is a tag and the client, the issuer have used one tag and you think there might be another one that's a little bit better, how significant is that? Well, I would say that depends on how significant is the amount that's being tagged. If it's a really significant amount that's being tagged and there is a relative difference in the two tags that you can use, of course, I mean, that's something that you have to use your professional judgment on whether the client is going to have to change that before you can accept the SF file, or whether it is acceptable to have that small difference in the tag, if you think it's a small difference. So there's no black and white. It's in audit, it's always a professional judgment in the end. And I think that as we come along with experience, we will see that we will, of course, both us and the issuers will download ESEF file from other issuers in the same industry, and we will see how did they tag it. We will learn as we go ahead, and the first year is not going to be perfect, I think, for no one. We already saw that in the Austria statistics, that there were 75% that had some validation errors, I think it said on the statistics. So it will not be perfect, but we have to have some guidance on how to set materiality, and that's what we're thinking about in Sweden.
Okay, you're saying it is about judgment and it's not black and white. I see that, for example, in the Netherlands, some of the errors we are considered really as black and white, and that is really whether it's not adhered to the XBRL or XML specifications. So it is, if indeed a file has an XML error, it may lead not in able to process the data. Well, then it is quite relevant to have that fixed before.
Agree, and that would be the same. That would, of course, be the same in Sweden.
Okay. I think, but I'm looking into my chat that we having had all the questions being asked. Mika, Mona, and Hendrik, thanks for this insight. I see that within the Nordics, well, for me, it's just one region, but there are three different, well, in this case, three countries. We didn't touch based on Iceland, and we haven't talked about Norway as well. Norway is quite interesting. Not part of the EU, but has been implementing ESEF. And Mika, I'm not sure whether you are still, yes, you are still here, but you shut on your camera to avoid some technical issues. But maybe you want to add something about Norway as a final remark.
Oh yes. First of all, I was very sorry about my connection problems. I don't know what is wrong here. But if we think that Esef is hard for Sweden or Finland, think about the issue that in Norway they are not the part of EU, so they don't have the labels in Norwegian. So they need to do some kind of thinking whether they every company use their own labels or do they use English. And so far, I don't know what is the situation right now, but last time I heard there is no solution for, or let's say common understanding how they should do that. So they have a situation there, what to do with them. So.
Yeah, so in Norway, Esef is being mandated by their own law, but preparing a file in their own local language is quite a challenge.
Yes.
That being said, I see at my clock that we are well, not running out of time, but having just about 5-6 minutes for closing remarks from Hilda, I believe.
Thank you very much, Ronald, and thank you also to Mona, to Hendrik, and to Mika for sharing your experience and your insights into what is going on in, well, almost all Nordic countries now. So thank you very much for that. Before we close, I would just like to refer to the Slido, and we have actually launched a short evaluation for this event on Slido, and we would really be very pleased if you would give us your feedback on this event via Slido. That would really be appreciated. Now, before we close, I would like to again thank Amana for their partnership for this event, and also thank you to Richard Beusen for sharing his experience with us. And Richard, is there anything as far as concluding remarks in 2 or 3 minutes that you would like to share with us?
Yes, thank you very much, Hilde. First of all, I was busy in the chat and tried to answer as many questions as possible. I hope everything worked and you have been able to see my answers. So first of all, I can fully repeat what Phillip also said. So the lessons learned are start early, start with the 22 report, do the tagging now, send it to your auditor now, because they have to review it now. In the busy season, there will not be enough time, or it will be very stressful. So start really, that's for the preparers as well as for the audit firms, right? Do a dry run. Then regarding the audit of the Esef report, it seems that there are indeed differences in several countries. What is the content of the audit? What do auditors do actually when they're doing the check on the report? And I think there are three major things you have to check in an Esef report. First of all is the technical validity. Yeah, this is usually quite simple check because you can just put it into a tool and it will do the validation. But the second check, for instance, is very important. Does the Esef report have the same information like the human readable one? There were many issues. I've seen many reports in my life already, and many issues regarding what's displayed for human in the XHTML view and what's in the technical view that a machine will use, or that a computer will analyze or extract from the Esef report. And of course, there should be the same information, because if an analyst from Bloomberg in the future will use the Esef reports as a data source, they want to have the correct numbers, right? It must have the same information. That's very important. Yeah. And last but not least, the tagging, of course, needs to be checked. But I have the feeling that the second check that I just mentioned is a little bit underrepresented yet. And I really encourage you to do this specific check. You know? One thing that was also very interesting is was a statement also from Phillip, aligned to the taxonomy. I think there is a standardization going on already. So companies and preparers are starting to think about, why do I have so many extensions here in my Esef report? And does it maybe make sense to change my report to reflect the taxonomy a little bit more. Yeah, and I think that really makes sense. Yeah, and last but not least, I really think there must be a European-wide best practice for the digital signature, because right now there's a lot of confusion. I get many calls about this. Richard, can you help us? How is Germany doing it? And this is indeed something that where we either need to have a standard satellite ESMA saying this is how it should be done, or where we need to find some best practices. Yeah, that's it from my side.
Thank you very much, Richard. So we have work to be done for the next coming months and years for sure on that. Before we close, we would like to also announce that actually while we were having this webinar, the CAOB, the Committee of European Auditors Oversight Bodies, has actually launched a second guideline on auditors' involvement in financial statements in Esef. It is available now. It's a bit different from the first one they had. The objective is really to describe the expectations they have of the auditors' involvement, and it refers to the aspects of the SF assurance engagement. It touches on planning, on independence, on communication with those charged with governance, materiality, use of experts, reliance on controls, and those type of matters. So we will definitely upload it on our website, because I just wanted to indicate to all of you that on the Accountants Europe website, we have collected guidance on SF, and in a few days, actually the summary of this event, the recording of this event, and links to the SF resources, including on SF reporting, but also on assurance, will be available on our meeting page of this event. And actually there was a question around that. It is also indicating if audit and assurance is required, if it is actually clear, or if we are aware of it. So hopefully that will be useful for you. And before closing, I would like to thank all of our speakers and our moderators. I also would like to thank very much Amana and Richard again, and also the Accounts Europe team to put this all together, Andrea, Harum, and Nina. And finally, I also would like to thank all our participants. We had 160 stable participants throughout the whole event, but we had 342 at times going in and coming back, going and coming, as we say, for this event. So many thanks for all of you. We hope it was useful, and I would say stay tuned on SF with us. Have a good day. Bye.